it was like our whole world felt like it opened up sexually to get to know each other and to get to know each other's bodies. And we learned so much about each other, and it just changed everything for us. And it became my favorite night of the week.
Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. After recording last week's episode with Dr. Glenn and Phyllis Hill, we stayed on and chatted a little longer. We got started talking about sex dates and how Glenn and Phyllis look forward to this time every week that they, quote-unquote, set world records, as they call it, which I learned was something they both enjoy. Seeing how many orgasms Phyllis can have during one lovemaking session, for example, is one of their world records they strive for, and that to me sounds awesome. So I suggested we record another episode to share this fun and creative concept with you. If you missed last week's episode, we talked a lot about emotional connection. This week's episode is all about the sexual connection, and it's a fun one and full of so many nuggets. After listening to this episode, if you're like, we should totally do a sex date, but I want some specifics on how to make it amazing for ourselves, then save the dates in your calendar for July 12th through 14th. Emily and I will be putting on a virtual retreat where you get to join us from the comfort of your hotel room, Airbnb, or bedroom. This retreat is focused on enhancing your sexual experiences as a couple, and the details are on our website. Did you know about a recently launched signature program, the Get Your Marriage On program? We've had dozens of people sign up since our launch already, and I think you should check it out too, because I truly believe it will make an impact on your marriage. It's for any couple that wants a stronger, more intimate connection, including sexual and emotional intimacy. Here's what one participant has said about it. What resonated with me the most was the idea of a step-by-step focused program. My biggest complaint of this other coach's courses I've taken in the past is that they tend to be too theoretical and not enough tell me exactly what I need to do this week to fix things. So the idea of a course focused on digestible chunks that lay out specific improvement goals along with coaching to create accountability for reaching those goals and help applying them to real life is very appealing to me. He's got it right. More details about this amazing program are on our website at getyourmarriageon.com. Go there and then click on the free masterclass or see the results other people are getting in their marriages too. And last but not least, it's time for a weekly tradition of reading a recent podcast review. Here's this week's review from Apple Podcasts. You're going to love the wide range of topics that Dan discusses on his podcast. He's all about helping marriages increase their intimacy, and he delivers his message in a clear and encouraging format. I look forward to his podcast every Friday. And if you haven't downloaded his apps, Intimately Us and Just Between Us, do it now. They are amazing. Love, love, love this podcast. Thank you for that review. If you hear your review that you left on Apple Podcasts in a future episode, you can email me at support@getyourmarriageon.com, and I will personally mail you a gift to say thanks for that. And now, let's talk about sex dates. Woohoo! Glenn and Phyllis, welcome back to the Get Your Marriage On podcast.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
I had such a great time having a conversation with you recently, and I just had to have you back because there's so much more that you can offer for me and for my audience. And so I wanted to ask you more questions. So thanks for coming back.
Cool.
Yeah, I love it.
Absolutely.
So
Glad to be here.
we've been chatting a little bit, and good advice that I received, and probably you received too, I'm assuming, is to date your spouse regularly, even after you're married. And I want to know what your experience has been like dating your spouse after marriage.
Well, that is definitely advice that we got early on.
And many times.
And many times, yeah. We would go to, weekend retreats or whatever, and it seemed like that was always the go-to, is don't forget that. Be sure and, continue to date after you're married. And, at this point, I feel like we were young. We had at least 3 kids, maybe 4. And yeah, we were really trying to do the, carve out a time to go on a date, get that babysitter, and, it was for us early on in life, we had to really save to make that even happen. Like we didn't have family nearby that would just take the kids. So we had to hire a babysitter. And then, for us, it was like, okay, we're in a small town, what restaurant? And we both like movies, but you can't always predict what movie is going to be out in that moment. But yet that was always there too. Let's go to the dinner and then go to the movies.
And the classic date.
Yeah, dinner and the classic dinner and a movie, the classic date. And I feel like that's pretty much that was our go-to. That's probably all the energy we really had at that point in our lives. Yeah. And, so that was just the easy go-to. It wasn't too creative, but that's kind of where we went with that, I would say.
Yeah, and the problem was that we were so disconnected relationally, or so frequently disconnected, and sometimes for long periods of time, that just gave us an extra hour and 45 minutes to fight, to be at odds, to be in conflict about something. So the whole, and again, I'm not against the idea of it, but it usually does not play out that well. For couples, if they don't know how, they don't have the tools to be connected anyway. So now this is just some extra time where they can be alone and not be connected, which is certainly what we experienced.
Yeah. I remember those times where, you plan so far in advance to just get the babysitter, get the date on the calendar. And then, we would go to dinner and we would hit trigger topics. And man, before we knew it, it was just like this disappointing, sad experience. And then, but we'd already bought the movie tickets. And, if it wasn't, I know for me, the way I remember it back in the day, if it wasn't a rom-com and it was some action-packed movie or even a drama, sometimes it was like the movie would affect how we felt towards each other so much.
Yeah. So eventually, and again, this is a very slow
hey,
evolution.
Let me mention that because I just think when we would get home, I always remember that I felt like, oh my gosh, this was a date night, so I need to have sex, whether I want to or not. It's kind of like I felt like that was the thank you for taking me out that night. And of course, it was always late, which was never a good. I'm not a night owl, so late was always painful for me, just physically, But after Glenn would get back from taking the babysitter home, I felt like, okay, we got to end this well. And so then we would have, some kind of sexual encounter. And then it'd be like, okay, check mark. We did the date and we had sex. So we got it done in one night. And yet after years of doing that, it just felt like we were really missing something. This cannot be what is going to take our marriage to the next level.
Right.
How did you know that this wasn't right? Was it the disconnection in it? Was it the fighting in it? Was it the quality of sex? What was it about it that kind of was a tipping point for you to realize something here isn't right?
Right. All of the above.
Yeah, all of the above. But I think the biggest thing was it was like sex was still the big pain point in our marriage. And it was like, okay, going out to dinner and a movie does not make the sex any better. And there are too many variables that actually play into it in a negative way. If we fight at dinner, oh my gosh, forget it then. If the movie is not good, then that affects us emotionally. And then sex is, not great. And so I think we just realized we are not setting this up well to actually get to that place where we want to. And again, for us, sex was the biggest thing that early on in our married life we had fought about the most and had so much trauma and pain around the early years of that.
Yeah. And again, this was a slow evolution for us. It's not like it was one day, on June the 4th, we figured it all out. But we just started talking, and we've been on a direction, a quest to have a great relationship for a long time. We thought everything was set on our wedding day, but it took us 2 decades plus to really start getting traction. But we thought there has to be a better approach to sexual connection because this doesn't make sense. It's just not working. Looking back, we didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, we realized that Phyllis mostly disassociated. So she's not feeling seen. She's not feeling heard. She's not feeling valued. She's not feeling connected with her partner, which was me. But she does sex stuff anyway. Well, the only way she does that is to disassociate. Just to say, well, I'm not going to be my authentic self. I'm not going to tell him how hurt I felt this afternoon, how wounded, how damaged our relationship was this morning, and I'm still feeling the effects of that. So she just has to disassociate. Again, we didn't know that at the time. We had no concept of that. But nonetheless, in spite of all that, we said there's got to be a better approach to this whole date thing. And so we, I think I've said before, but I'm the educated one. Phyllis is the smart one. She figures out all the things that actually matter. And she said, what if we had a sex date? And I was like, that sounded appealing to me. I'm like, well, what's a sex date?
Sign me up.
Yeah. So just a time. And now, I mean, we've been doing this for many, many years, where it's just a special time each week, once a week, where we set aside time just for all things sexual. So it's not just what we call tab A and slot B. It's not just sexual intercourse, but it's all sorts of sexual playtime.
Well, and when this started, we had 4 children at home, and we were like, how can this work? Like, how can we set aside an evening a week where this could be, and we can't afford for the kids to go somewhere else. There's not somewhere else for the kids to go. So when we started, it was like we figured out that Glenn, after dinner, he would take over. So him and the kids would clean up after dinner. Then they would do the bath time and the homework and get things laid out for the next day for school. And it was kind of like I was off duty starting at dinner. And I would go back to our bedroom, which we had a bathroom connected to our bedroom. And we thankfully had a nice bathroom, a jacuzzi tub. And I was able to kind of take my mom hat and leave it in the other part of the house. And then I was able to kind of become just in touch with my sexual side and be able to, and I just remember the music, I remember lighting candles and having my favorite beverage and maybe a snack, like my favorite chocolate that the kids were not allowed to touch.
Yes.
And, that, and I just remember loving baths back then and just, and even reading, like I made myself like, don't read a parenting magazine, pick out something that reminds you of who you are, but besides a mom. And so by the time Glenn joined me, it might have been 2 hours later, and I was ready to have fun with him, and it was still early enough in the evening, that I knew the kids were taken care of. They were in bed. They were done. They weren't going to come knocking on our door. And it was, maybe 8:30. And so I'm like, wow, we've got several hours before I'm too tired to function. And then it was a slow, it was like, okay, well, it was like we were meeting each other, for the first time in a way. Like we would just look and smile. And it was like, we've got an hour ahead of us. We've got 2 hours ahead of us. And it changed so much. That alone was so huge for us, because then we were like, well, what do you want to do? And it was like our whole world felt like it opened up sexually to get to know each other and to get to know each other's bodies. And so much grew out of that, where we learned so much about each other and about just how so much of our sex life had been very limited and very much in a box based on past rules and, even past misinformation. I mean, some of it was just, we really didn't know each other very well in that arena. And so having weekly sex dates just changed everything for us. And it became my favorite night of the week, because I knew I was going to have from the, I always made sure dinner was ready like earlier and earlier. So it was like Glenn would come home from work and I'd be like, dinner's ready. And, because I just couldn't wait to have that much time to myself and to be able to transform into, a
Phyllis the woman instead of Phyllis the mom.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that was huge for us. And it, even to this day, I would say it's my favorite night of the week is when we have our sex dates. And now, of course, we don't have kids at home. So we start much earlier in the day. We start around 4 p.m., 3 if we can squeeze in a little extra time. And, we go for a walk and we go to dinner out. And then we come home after dinner and have the whole evening in front of us. And it's just so fun, even to this day, in the things that we try, and we're very adventuresome for sure at this point in our lives.
And that's a big part of what that allows. First of all, I mean, Phyllis alluded to it, but it's so important. Moms of young children, they play that role of keeping these humans alive. And I would suggest the best dad in the world still does not substitute for that. I think women just, I think some of it's biological, but for whatever reason,
they have that
the
nature.
Female just, right. The female just plays that role. So to transform from being the mom, especially, women who are breastfeeding, well, that's just a fact of life. That's what's happening. So her breasts are not these wonderful, this wonderland for the partner, but they're a nutrition source for the baby. Well, how do you make that, transition? How do you switch that? And that setting up the sex date allowed us to do that so that we had time for her to shift from being a mom to being a lover. But then also it provides this extensive time, and we're involved sexually many other times during the week, but the sex date allows this time to explore. And in our masterclass, we talk about the X's of sex dates. And they really start with an E, but we call them X's.
Are there 3 X's? Is it triple X?
Well, there's 4 of them. It's even better. But the first one is to explore, because for most of us, we don't, and you explore your setting, you explore your senses, you explore your body, you explore your partner's body. Well, that's not going to happen in a 15-minute sexual encounter. I mean, there can be a little of that, but not much.
Usually, whereas you have a deadline, you're rushed. You got to you start skipping important things.
Right.
Or,
yeah. Well, just having extended makeout time, like, oh my word, we so often just forget how important that is, especially for the female, just to really get things going and to get the body reacting. Kissing for us just is always the best beginning of things, because that's what awakens my body. And, it's just those kinds of things where what you just said is so true. When you're limited on the amount of time, or you're so aware, oh my word, it's almost 11, I have to get up in the morning. And that's, I think, where the resentment can even come in.
Oh, yeah.
Like that. You always approach me when, we're trying to go to bed. And too often in marriage is an awkward dance of how to approach the topic anyway. Like the question, you want to have sex tonight? And it can fall into resentment. It can fall into duty and pressure, instead of realizing, oh, this is our date night. Like, this is our sex date. This is when we get to have fun. And I loved it that he took over all of what I would normally have done. And we've taught this for many years. And so we get a lot of other people's suggestions. And I had some friends, and I loved what they did, where the dad took the kids to grandma's and grandpa's for dinner that night. And so she had actually, starting like at 4 p.m, because he came home and he took the kids and left, and she loved that time. Like, she could do all kinds of things that she wanted for herself. And it was very intentional. I mean, you don't go shopping. You don't leave the house and wear yourself out shopping. It was more that she could do things for herself at home. And then by the time he came back, he brought the kids back, but he put them right to bed. So then they never saw mom again that night. And by the time he joined her, she was very interested in him and very interested in having fun. And I know we learned so many things during that season of how to incorporate, some of our favorite activities. Like, we would say, okay, well, we want to play Scrabble, but every word has to have to do with sex. And, or, we would play a card game, and the winner got to choose, their favorite sexual activity. Like, we got very creative. And with that much time, you could be creative. And so there were a lot of things that we explored, I think, during that season, is when I figured out, what is my sexy? And for me, I thought it had to be, white lace lingerie. And I figured out during that time, I don't like white lace lingerie. I don't feel good in it.
It doesn't black lace. Yeah.
Well,
black leather.
Black leather, actually. But it's just like, I realized, wow, my thing is very different than what I thought I was supposed to do and be.
Right.
And during that time, we had like we wanted to learn all of this about each other. We wanted to learn and just explore. That was a big part of it is like, wow, when you've got the whole evening and, there were things that we also were like, you've got time for a massage. You have time to explore what you can do with whipped cream and because you've got hours and there's not this quickie mentality and late at night interaction, but it's like, wow, you guys learned and tried so many things. And you also think about it on the other days of the week. Like I would anticipate that day. And so sometimes I would be out, maybe at the grocery store and I would pick up, chocolate covered strawberries because I knew they were Glenn's favorite. And I would, hide them. We always had a mini fridge in our part of the house. And so I could put things in there that were for our special sex date. And it just became something that we thought about throughout the week. We would sometimes be just just talking to each other on the other days, like, oh, babe, I can't wait, for Wednesday night. And I was thinking about this. And what would you think about that? And I ordered this and it's going to be here in time. And it was like we had sexual banter around this one night all week long. And we're able to just build our sexual repertoire with each other. And I don't know that we would have ever gotten there if we had not started having a weekly sex date. And it just changed everything for me. It's like I learned what pleasure was for me by having extended playtime. Yeah. And it was incredible.
Yeah, and the second X of sex dates is to experiment. And the reality is most couples don't experiment at all. They just do this tab A and the slot B, and there might be some variation on that. But that's just all they do, which leads us to the third X, which is to expand your menu, expand your repertoire. Most people go to their sexual restaurant and they open the menu and there's just one item on it, again, which is tab A and the slot B. And that's all they know. And you can have it with garlic or without. It's like you have a little bit of variation, but that's it. And for many of us, certainly the two of us, that was what was understood. And it's so fascinating to me, the message that we both got about sexuality, even though we got so little messaging about sexuality. It was just somehow, I don't know, osmosis or something. We knew that sex was bad. We knew sex was wrong. It was dirty. Well, sex in marriage is okay. But we didn't know anything beyond that. But we knew that it was a fearful thing. You better be careful. You better stay inside the box. We didn't know who invented the box. We didn't even know exactly what the box was, but we knew that there was a box. And the box is so important. Don't even go near the edge of the box. So the way you do that is you just keep it very, very, very plain. So you make sure that you don't get anywhere outside the box, because we assumed we would either be instantly zapped to hell or something, if we ever ventured outside that box. And to convey to couples that, no, there is no box. Just throw it out. It's just the two of you, and nobody gets to vote on what you do sexually. Whatever bonds the two of you relationally, that's the goal. And we always say to couples, we're not going to be there. We're not going to buy the video. So we don't care what you do. You have freedom to do whatever you want. Now that also means you don't get to choose what we do. And if somehow you hear on TikTok or something what we did, well, you don't get a vote. We're not asking. You're not going to be there. You're not going to buy the video of us. So we get to choose whatever we do. But as our menu began expanding, and as we're like, oh my gosh, are we allowed to try this or that? Is that an option? And, there's tons of stuff that we tried that we're like, well, that wasn't what we thought it would be. It worked in my head. It doesn't work in real life. And so, that did not end up staying on the menu. But we began expanding that, our sexual interaction. But again, that comes through extended playtime, not a 10, 15-minute encounter, late on a Friday night. And so the sex dates became this incredible adventure for us and remain that to this day. And we're amazed that the sexual vista can never be reached. You just keep traveling, you keep journeying. And it's not every week anymore because we're fairly old. We've been at this a long time. But there's so many times that we look at each other like, oh my gosh, we've never tried that before. That was, and sometimes afterwards we go, yeah, we'll probably never try that again. That didn't work. That was weird. Or we go, I think we could get good at it if we practice. So we got to try that 5 more times. And then there's sometimes where he's like, oh my gosh, babe, that was just, that rocked my world. We got to do that 100 more times in the next 2 years. But we're always experimenting. We're always journeying together and discovering new things.
Yeah. I want to go back to just, I think for me, it changed everything. And one of the things we talk about and teach in our master class is that sex is a party for the female. And
yes,
yeah,
I 100% agree. Female-centric sex is absolute best. Yes.
Yeah. And it changed everything. Like for us to figure that out and to go, oh, okay, my body is so much more, in a good way, complicated.
Yeah, I mean, if you look what happens anatomically, physiologically, psychosexually, and even biochemically for the female, it's a different universe than what happens for the male. And the male's fine. Don't worry. He'll be okay. We always tell guys, we're like, look, the party's designed for her, but it's a buy one, get one free ticket. So you'll get a free ticket. And I should mention, years ago when we first started presenting this, I assumed, because every human's unique, there's lots of variety on the planet, and I thought we're going to get pushback from a percentage of men, I don't know what, 5%, 10%, 20%, who are going to be like, oh, wait a minute, how come the party gets to be about her? Shouldn't it be 50-50 or whatever? I have never sat with the couple where the guy resists that. Never, and which startles me, because I've sat with a lot of people, and I'm like, this is amazing. Literally, every couple I've ever sat with, the man is like, great, sign me. I do get a ticket, right? Like I get invited to the party and I'm like, oh yeah. And I've never seen the man who's like, well, that's not right. That's not fair. Which is, I think, makes sense once you grasp the concept, but it's also thrilling that men love the idea. And I am convinced most men already wanted that. They just had no clue. They had no idea how to connect, how to bond with her emotionally, and therefore had no idea how to connect and bond with her sexually. And so it just became an activity, just something that they did.
That's good. Great. So I've heard you say you set world records in your sexual dates. Can you allude to what that means for you too, and maybe give our listeners like an idea of things they can shoot for and enjoy?
Yeah.
Well, again, I think for me, I learned during that time, that extended playtime, that I could have multiple orgasms. And prior to that, I did not know that was possible. And then when you think about the history, in a 15 to 20 minute encounter, you're lucky to get one. And I think for many, probably of your listeners as well that were like me, I felt guilt because it took me so long just to get one.
Wow.
And so I didn't think, we should keep going. And
factoring in that in our early marriage for the first several years, you didn't orgasm at all.
Right.
We had just given up. We're like, and we literally, I don't know if we said that in the first podcast we did, just that Phyllis and we both just concluded she was broken. She's just something wrong with her. And too bad. Sorry. I hate it for you. And I don't think I was mean about it. I just accepted that, it
is what it is.
And we had zero idea, and nobody around us ever talked about sex. Right. So there was no discussion about it. It was just, we were just stuck, in this defeat the rest of our lives.
And I know for me, just in the way I was brought up, and I think for Glenn too, and I guess really what you see in a lot of just television movies is that they both come at the same time.
Yes.
And it doesn't take any time at all. And usually even I think so often TV movies portray it that she's the one making noise and he is quiet. And see, that's not the way it was for us. And so in having this extended playtime, it was like, wow, we realized that we just had it so wrong. And to learn my body and the fact that females are capable of having many, and for an extended period of time, it was like, this is mind-blowing that I can keep going and I can have so many that we're not sure how many. And eventually, whatever time, 30 minutes in, it's like, I just get exhausted. And yet my body is still very open to having more orgasms. And so I think that falls under what you're saying as far as world records. Just like we didn't know that was possible. And it's because we just didn't understand the female body. And it takes giving yourself permission, because I think for a lot of us, we feel guilt that it takes us so long. And we also have to work through a lot of emotion that's tied around sex for us anyway. And talk to way too many women who feel even shame connected to it when they really let themselves go.
Yes.
And so to get into multiple orgasms, you have to really let yourself go. And that can be scary. You have to process through the fear or the shame or the things that kind of come at you during those times. But again, when you've set aside a day a week, a night a week, you kind of go, okay, so I can grow in this. I can learn how to let go and how to, be in that space for a longer period of time.
Yeah, but for her to get to that level, she has to feel safe with her partner because it's so incredibly vulnerable. And if she was wounded by him 7 times that day, he's sexually activated. The typical male can get sexually activated in 10 to 12 seconds. Typical female is activated sexually in 10 to 12 minutes, and never the two will meet. And so just to recognize that it's not that she's cold. It's not that she doesn't like you. It's not that she's not attracted to you. She simply doesn't get activated sexually as quickly. Again, not because she's bad or broken. That's just her makeup. The shortest period I've ever heard is a female say she gets activated sexually in about 2.5 minutes. And that's, I have over 30,000 seat hours, so I've sat with a lot of people, and that's the quickest that I've ever heard.
From a biological perspective, that makes perfect sense, though, because what happens in a sexual encounter from a male perspective, like 6 minutes later, he's done. He's out of the picture. But for a woman, that 6 minutes can turn into 9 months of pregnancy, 18 years of childbearing.
Right.
So biologically, she's going to be programmed to be very careful who she's letting into her body and her heart, because she's more vulnerable in that situation.
Yeah, that's a side note, but I think it's worth mentioning that what the female contributes to a child versus the male. I mean, the male contributes about half a teaspoon's worth, and he enjoyed doing it. The female, it wrecks her body. I mean, for 9 months, I'm
maybe wreck is a little too severe, but her body does change in
as far as what happens.
Yeah,
but as far as what happens for her, I mean, dude, if you've been around pregnant women, their body is they're in some level of pain for months and months, right. Whether it's what we call morning sickness, whether their body, I mean, literally their joints ache because they're carrying this extra human. This human inside of them is sucking up resources like crazy. Literally, the baby becomes the priority. And it's just biological. The mom's body gets the leftovers, so that the baby has to be prioritized. So the mom experiences a lot of challenges with that, and frequently it's pain. The male doesn't experience any of that. And then even going through childbirth, well, that's another whole challenge in itself. And then the first day, the first week, the first month, the mom, and again, the greatest dad in the world, I'm not saying dads are jerks in it, but the mom is so tuned into this new human, keeping that baby alive. If she's breastfeeding, then literally she's the nutrition source for this baby. Males don't go through any of that. Again, they can tune in and be, great participants, but it's a completely different experience. So I love what you say, because that's so true. This female just subconsciously, unconsciously is like, wait a minute, this could cost me a lot. For you, for the guy, is like, well, that was just fun for you. And you're not going to have all of the possible ramifications of this like I am.
Right.
I don't know that I ever thought of it that way before, Dan, but that's a great point, that her body is not supposed to get activated so instantly, because she has a whole lot more cost to count than the male does. Wow, that's pretty powerful. Good point.
Can we end our conversation today talking about sexual friendship and what that looks like?
Yeah.
As I sit here with the two of you, I can just tell you do have this generosity about the two of you towards each other. And that's something I hope all couples listening learn how to cultivate. Can you say a few things on sexual friendship?
Wow.
Yeah, I love that. And that was part of all of this, I think, during that season in our lives where I realized that I am the only one in this space with Glenn. I am his only sexual friend. And even the verbiage really helped me come about it very differently. Because in our early years, this was such a painful topic. And I rejected him constantly. And there was so much confusion because before marriage, it was the can't wait to get married so we can finally have sex. And, not having a good first encounter, I just went into a dark place of, I don't want to ever do that again. And so that was very confusing for Glenn, very painful. And it just led us down a road that was very destructive. And so when we realized that is not what was ever the plan, that was never God's plan for sex. And so when we started really figuring all of this out, there was still, though, a lot that had happened early that was very wounding. And so when we went into the arena of sexual friendship, it was like, okay, I do friendship well, and I like my friends, and I do things with them. I'll have a girlfriend reach out and ask me to go shopping with her, which I'm not a shopper. I don't go shopping by myself. I don't like shopping. But when a girlfriend asks me, I'm like, yes, I'm there. I would love to spend time with you. So if you're running errands, going shopping, I'll go with you because I love spending time with you.
It's the friendship. It's to cultivate that friendship because you're a friend. You're going to be a friend. Right. It's not about the shopping. It's about the friendship.
Right. And so when I was able to take all of that mindset and put it into our sexual friendship, our sexual relationship, I stopped resisting and resenting. And I was able to show up in that space even when it wasn't on my mind in the moment. I was able to kind of calm my body down, like as in I'm safe in this relationship and he's just wanting my friendship and I want his friendship. And so it kind of opened up the door for a mind shift for me. And I think that was really huge. And then I think for Glenn as well, the friendship part, it was when he became more aware of me and became more aware of wanting to know me. What do you like? When you think about your best friends, they really do know what you like.
Oh, yeah.
Like they know if you're a mountain climber and they know that you love that, they know who to call when they want to go mountain climbing. And so we just realized that for each other, we wanted to be in that space sexually where I wanted him to know me and I wanted to know him. And it's like when you think of the term sexual friendship, it takes that adversarial,
competitive,
right. Or just even feeling pressure. Because you think about that, if you have a group of friends and you approach each of those friends or time with those friends as pressure, it's probably not a good group of friends.
No. Or a shaky foundation for a friendship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and that's as we learn the connection codes, just how to connect and realizing that, when we're emotionally bonded, that sets up friendship. And again, we're unique sexual partners. So the friendship is built on that close connection, or the friendship is that close connection. And then we add sex to it and it becomes extraordinary. Whereas if we're just trying to insert sex into a relationship that's not really even that bonded, we can have sexual activity and there actually can be some pleasure. There can be some enjoyment in it, but it's a whole different level. We call it dynamic sexual connection versus just sexual activity. And there's a universe difference between those, but that starts with emotional safety, emotional processing, emotional connection, and then we build dynamic sexual connection on top of that.
One thing we did, Dan, with you last time is we did the core emotion wheel, and we would love to do that just with what we call an issue-specific core emotion wheel on sex, because often that's where you got to start. You've got to be able to talk about it from the emotional side. And when we do this with groups, it's incredible the feedback that we get where people go, wow, I've been married 20 years. We did the core emotion wheel on sex, and things came out just that deep core level stuff that we've actually never talked about. And it's like sometimes you got to start there, and not sometimes. I would say we always start there.
Yeah.
And, even being able to talk about that on that level, because I think that what the world represents when you see anything, even like on a TV show, it's like it's this unspoken thing that you connect sexually like almost like your bodies just connect, but you don't ever talk about it. You don't ever share the fear or share the joy or share the sad. You don't do that. You just kind of, that would ruin the atmosphere. And that's a lie. That's actually not emotionally connecting.
Right.
And it is just incredible for us to be able to be in that space emotionally as well with our sexual activity. I mean, just that deep emotional connection makes such a difference with our sexual connection. Yeah. So if we have time, we would love to do that.
We demonstrate that. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And are we doing current or past?
You pick. Flip a coin.
Do past.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. That's probably more relatable.
Mm-hmm.
So we will do an issue-specific core emotion wheel on where we were at around our 10th anniversary, where we were.
Wow, gracious. Nasty.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's start there. I'll go first. So for me, I feel just a lot of anger and just confusion around sex. Like so much damage from the early days that still affect me. And I think that anger, it's brewing there. And I think that takes me into hurt too, that I feel that when you pursue me sexually, I just get stuck in that past wounding, and there's so much hurt in that. And I think I feel fear that I'm never going to be able to really connect with you deeply and emotionally in this arena, because there's been just so much damage, not just with you. I mean, this hurt goes back to my sexual abuse as a child and so many things, right? So I feel fear that this can't ever get right and get better. Lonely, I think for me, there is lonely because this is not talked about. And I feel like it's not supposed to be talked about, and that it's shameful to talk about it. And so I just suffer in silence a lot. I do feel guilt. I feel guilt that I reject you so much. Like, I see the pain that causes. I feel shame in that. I feel shame in just how I am not even comfortable with my own nakedness, my own body. It's like I don't like my body. I don't like myself. And so I just struggle with that. And I do feel so much guilt as far as how that hurts you. That hurts you constantly. Let's see. Which one do I have left? Joy. Okay. The joy in sex. Some of our best sex is when we go on vacation. That gives me a lot of hope. When it's just the two of us away for a weekend, I feel like I let go and I find the joy in sex. And so that gives me a lot of hope for just the healing. And I don't want to always just go on vacation and have I want to be able to have great sex all the time. But that joy is that I've experienced that with you, and I know that I can have that on a regular basis.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, for me, when I think about sex, 10 years into our marriage, mostly just pain, so much hurt, feeling rejected.
Wow.
I don't try to be sexually aroused. It just happens all the time. And that incredibly intense pain of just rejection, so much.
Yeah.
A lot of sadness, like how the heck did we end up here?
Yeah.
Leading up to our wedding, we were so excited about happily ever after, and we got so lost so immediately, and still have not recovered from that. So much loneliness in that. I don't feel seen and heard and valued by you. And of course, like you said, we don't have anybody to talk to, anybody that's safe that we can talk to vulnerably, openly about it. A lot of fear that this is just the way it is. We're 10 years in, and I don't know what we got, 30, 40, 50 more years together, and this is just the way it's going to be, which is not what we thought was going to happen, was not what we had signed up for. A lot of guilt in that. I mean, I still struggle tremendously being a good lover for you. I'm semi-clueless. I guess I'm better than I was, 9.5 years ago, but so much stuff I don't know, and I don't know how to get better. I don't know how to figure it out. A lot of shame in that. It's like, how did I end up like this? I thought it was going to be magical, and we were kind of told that, whether verbally or non-verbally, that just don't do sex before you're married, and then God will whatever work it all out. And that's certainly not been the case for us. A lot of anger in that. It's like, really, are you kidding me? There was nobody. No, we know we're still young, but we know a lot of people, and there's nobody that could help us, could help you, could help me figure some of this stuff out. This can't be right culturally, that it just stays like this. And I know we're not unique. We used to think we were unique in this, that we were just the only defeated couple, and to realize that, this is pretty standard where most people live. There is joy, when we do have good sexual encounters. They're few and far between, but there's a lot of joy when we get that, and then I feel some hope, and then, of course, I get crushed the next time I initiate anything. So, but it does drive me. Someday we'll develop something, we call it the connection codes, to help us figure out how to connect deeply. It'd be pretty exciting if such a thing ever existed.
Fun. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. What a great demonstration. Thank you. You went through all the 8 emotions in your connection codes that we discussed. That's the joy, fear, disgust, anger, lonely, hurt, guilt, and shame. And I like how you touch each other, you turn towards each other, and the person listening, your job is to do your best to stay in it and not disassociate or disconnect or fight back, argue, whatever. And that's what you're doing. So that's really good. And it's a good listening exercise more than anything else.
Yeah.
Right. Tell everyone where they can go to learn more about this process that you teach, about your course, including your great sex course and all the good things.
Thanks. Our website is connectioncodes.co, and that's where you can get a free download of what we just did, the core motion wheel. And Glenn has a private practice, so if it's something where you're like, I need a little more help than that, I would encourage you to book a session. That's also on our website. And then all the courses we have are on our website. And Late Night is the one on sex. We encourage you to do foundations first, because that's the whole emotional connection. You got to have deep emotional connection to have really dynamic sexual connection, and got to be safe in that place. And so that's all on our website. We also have a podcast and talk about all these things, both on the sex, but also on the emotional side as well. And then parenting, we have our oldest daughter, who wrote the book with us, also did a masterclass on parenting with us, and it's phenomenal. Yeah. And then she's on our podcast off and on. So yeah, we just love getting free content out there. And I know, Dan, last time you just put it in your show notes, all of the stuff.
Yep,
and
it'll be in the show notes here too.
Yeah, and we give you a coupon code, Dan. And then
great coupon code, by the way. Excellent coupon code.
And that gives your listeners 20% off of any of the master classes. So the master classes cost. The download for the core motion wheel is free. So yeah, love for you to have this content for sure.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, or even comment below. And go see what other wonderful videos we have that will help you strengthen your marriage intimately.